So the 2024 NFL season has been nothing short of incredible. We have young players becoming rising stars, and on the other hand, we have players that we might be seeing the end of an era. So today we're going to be breaking down who is the most valuable player on every NFL team this season, and some of these picks are obvious, but some of these might surprise you, so stick around. Let's hop straight into it. So first up, we're going to be breaking down the NFC teams, and we're going to head to the NFC North, and the first team we're going to break down today is one of my favorite teams to watch, and that is the Detroit Lions. And this season, they honestly had one of the most, if not the most, explosive offense this season, which makes my job even harder because everywhere you look, they have superstars on this roster. On one hand, you have one of the most consistent wide receivers, my boy Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think that there's one person that just really stands out above the rest, and that's my boy Jahmyr Gibbs. And the Lions offense really thrived off of Gibbs' versatility. He contributed 1,500 total yards and pretty much carried the Lions to the #1 seed against the Vikings. So next up, we're going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers, and the best player on this team is my boy Josh Jacobs. I think Jacobs bolstered Green Bay's running game with this powerful running style, and he is one of those guys that you just hand the rock off to and you know you're going to get positive yards. Up next, we got my boy Jalen Johnson for the Chicago Bears, and he recorded 42 solo tackles and 2 interceptions this season. I think if the Bears can complement him with some other key players, this Bears defense could be really good. For the last team for the NFC North, we got the Vikings, and of course, I'm going to give it to my boy Justin Jefferson, Jay Jettas. And even with Sam Darnold absolutely selling the Vikings season this year, Justin Jefferson still had a stellar season. He had 103 receptions for 1,533 yards and 10 touchdowns. And in my opinion, Justin Jefferson is for sure a top 2 wide receiver in the NFL. So next up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to head to the NFC East, and we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're going to be playing in the Super Bowl against the referees and the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, the best player on this team, no brainer, is Saquon Barkley, who is putting up generational numbers, showcasing his elite running back ability. He rushed for 2,005 yards this season and 13 touchdowns. And I low-key feel bad for Saquon because Jalen Hurts is a 1-yard touchdown merchant. Like, I know Jalen Hurts be looking at Saquon like this when he gets stopped at the 1-yard line. But on top of that, this is the only guy that can stop us from watching Travis Kelce propose to Taylor Swift during the Super Bowl. And I know for a fact, me personally, I'm going to be looking at the screen like Homelander if I see Travis Kelce get down on one knee. So the next team we're going to talk about is the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going to give it to my boy CeeDee Lamb. I think Lamb continues to be a dominant force on offense. And anybody that watched the Cowboys this season could tell that CeeDee Lamb was playing through a tough shoulder injury, but he was still being a route technician and recorded over 1,200 receiving yards. Up next, we have the New York Giants, and I'm going to give it to my boy Malik Nabers. I think personally he had an immediate impact on this team, despite having inconsistencies at the quarterback position. I think if you just studied the game of football and just look at his exceptional route running and just his hands, you can tell this dude is really talented. Honestly, I can foresee in the next year him being a top 10 receiver. Up next, we have the Washington Commanders, and at first I was going to put Terry McLaurin, but then I really thought about it. It's of course Jayden Daniels. And Daniels brought a new dynamic to this Commanders team. He passed for 3,500 yards and has the QB rushing record for a rookie with 891 yards. And if I was a Commanders fan, I would honestly be really happy because you guys have a solid quarterback for the next couple years. So next up, we're going to head to the NFC South, and I got to give credit where credit is due. I'm going to give the most valuable player to Baker X Mayfield. And through all the adversity, I really think he had a stellar season, and he really revitalized this offense. He threw for over 4,500 yards and a whopping 41 touchdowns, which is pretty crazy for a man that was bouncing around teams and couldn't find a stable home. Up next, we got the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm going to give it to my boy Bijan, aka Bijan Robinson. And in my opinion, he's pretty much the focal point of this offense. He rushed for 1,300 yards, and over the past couple years, he is definitely one of the most talented running backs we have seen. So next up, I'm going to be talking about the New Orleans Saints, and one of the more older running backs in the league I'm going to put as the most valuable player on this list, and his name is Alvin Kamara. And for pushing 30, he's still one of the best dual threat running backs in the game right now. But I think this Saints team really had a lot of bad luck with a lot of big injuries this season. But hopefully they can bounce back in the 2025 season. But speaking of rebuild, the last team in this division, we're going to be talking about the Carolina Panthers. And I'm not going to lie, the only dude that's really been consistent throughout the whole year, being pretty much the backbone of this team, is Chuba Hubbard. And Hubbard really stepped in as a key contributor in the backfield. And low-key, he's one of those unsung heroes of the 2024 season. And even though he only had 1,200 yards, if his season didn't get cut short, I think he would have had a really good season. So up next, we're going to be heading to the NFC West, and we're going to be going to San Fran, talking about the 49ers. And of course, I got to give this to the best linebacker in the NFL. And of course, his name is Fred Warner. Fred Warner had a whopping 131 tackles this season. That's enough said. I don't even need to say anything more about this dude. So up next, we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. And this one was honestly really surprising. Like, I was going to put Geno Smith or DK Metcalf up here. But then I dug a little deeper and found Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was a big key factor to this offense. And just comparing DK and Jackson's stats, as you guys can see on screen, Jackson is low-key the wide receiver 1 on this team. So up next, I'm going to be talking about the Rams, and there's 2 players on this team I think really deserve it. One is Jared Verse and the other is Puka Nacua. With Puka's injury, I don't think I can put him on this list because Jared Verse just played that good. He made the Pro Bowl this season with 66 tackles, 18 QB hits, and 11 tackles for a loss. And I think this Rams team is one team you can't sleep on because their defense and their offense are looking pretty nice. And then the last team for the NFC, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, we're going to give it to my boy Trey McBride. McBride had 111 receptions, which is second in the franchise history. And one interesting thing I learned is that he had more receptions than Larry Fitzgerald himself, and he finished the season with 1,146 yards. So before we get into the next part of the video, if you guys don't mind hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button on the way to 7K subs, man, I would greatly appreciate it. That just lets me know that you guys really rock with my NFL content, and I can pump more of those videos out for you guys. So next up, we're going to be talking about the AFC East, and the first team in this division, we're going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills. And of course, we're going to give it to the MVP, Josh Allen. And he's pretty much been the winter soldier, the lone soldier, piloting this team. And I honestly thought that he had it in him to beat Patrick Mahomes, but I'm not going to take anything away from him. He still had a great season. Next up for the Miami Dolphins, I'm going to give it to Devon Achane. And I think Achane was the only consistent player on this team, with Tua being in and out. Tyreek Hill just wasn't hitting how he was supposed to be hitting. Like, this dude Tyreek Hill, I remember last year, was offensive player of the year and can't even score 10 touchdowns. So I just can't give it to him this season. For the New York Jets, this team is honestly cursed. Like, looking at this roster, like, they have a lot of great players on paper, but for some reason, they just can't get the wins. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is cursed, but I'm just going to give it to my boy Sauce Gardner. Even though this is one of his down seasons, he is still a cornerback you can rely on when you put him on an island. Up next, I'm going to be talking about the New England Patriots, and we're going to give it to Christian Gonzalez. And just while watching some footage of the Patriots, he really stood out to me in the secondary because he makes a lot of key plays when the Patriots need it most. So next up, we're going to be breaking down the NFC North, and this was one division I knew for every single team who the MVP was going to be. So starting up with my favorite team, the Ravens, man, we're going to give it to my boy Lamar Jackson, Mr. MV3. If you can share MVP, I think Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen got it. Jackson literally put up a MVP caliber season, throwing for 4,172 yards and 41 touchdowns, while rushing for over 900 yards. Honestly, the list just goes on and on, but next up, we're going to be talking about the Steelers, and we're going to give it to my boy TJ Watt. He's just like that X factor on the defensive side of the ball, and he's just one of those dudes that you just have to stop or you're not going to have a good day. For the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to give it to Myles Garrett, and his dominance on the defensive line is really just unparalleled. He totaled 114 sacks, which was second in the NFL this season. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is the one team that I'm going to give the MVP to two people. Of course, the first one is going to go to Joe Shiesty, who, if you looked at Joe Burrow's stats without looking at his record, you would think that this dude is the undisputed MVP. But unfortunately, he has like one of the worst defenses I've ever laid my eyes on. And then the next person is obviously Jamar Chase. And I have to give it to Chase because he won the Triple Crown, which just goes to show that if this team had at least a top 10 defense, they would be fighting for the Super Bowl. Up next, we have the NFC South, and we're going to be talking about the Indianapolis Colts. And I have two players on my list today. If I had to pick one, I'm going to give it to Jonathan Taylor. But the other person I would put into contention is Zaire Franklin. But I think Taylor's performance was pretty impressive this season. He rushed for 1,400 yards on this Colts offense. And other than his silly mistakes like dropping the ball on the 1 yard line, I think he's still a really good running back. He's just not on a great team. But put him on a better team, and I promise you that he's going to be carrying a team to the playoffs every season. So up next, we're going to be talking about the Houston Texans. And I'm going to give it to my boy Derek Stingley Jr. I really like this cornerback. Like, he's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch in the league. He recorded 5 interceptions and 18 pass breakups, which is second in the league. And if you guys just truly watch him play, like, his IQ is just on the next level. And I personally think that this is someone that we're going to be hearing his name for the next couple years. So up next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm going to give it to Brian Thomas Jr. Thomas emerged as a really dominant threat on the offensive side of the ball. So for the last team in this division, we're going to be talking about the Tennessee Titans. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I don't think I can really name 5 people on this roster. Like if you're watching this video right now, I want you to pause this video and just think of 5 people. Like, I can't name 5 people. Like, the only person that really comes to my mind is Jeffrey Simmons, just off the top of my head. But after just doing some research, watching some film, Harold Landry is pretty much the only dude that stands out. He is an outside linebacker for the Titans who produced 9 sacks this season, 15 quarterback hits, and 15 tackles for loss. So lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we have the AFC West, and we're going to be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning champions this season. And of course, the best player on this team is my boy Chris Jones. Let's go, let's go. Now I'm just playing with y'all. I can't even hate. The best player on this team is my boy Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is probably one of the most elite quarterbacks in the league right now. And even though he hasn't had a spectacular season this year, like, we're not seeing the Patrick Mahomes we've seen in the past. Mahomes is arguably one of the most elite quarterbacks of all time. This dude just knows how to win games. Like, he just knows the Krabby Patty secret formula to being a winner. So next up, we have the Chargers, and I'm going to change my answer for this one. I was going to give it to Justin Herbert, but I'm going to give it to Ladd McConkey. But I think these two players' dynamic is really something special. And just watching Ladd play, I just don't understand how whenever I watch Ladd catch the ball, there's not a defender in like an 8-yard radius for some reason. Like, his route running must be so crispy that the defenders need a map or something. Like, I don't know. Like, this dude is really nice. Up next for the Raiders, we have my boy Brock Bowers, who probably had one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time. Brock Bowers has the most receptions for a rookie and the receiving record for a tight end, which just goes to show how much of a dynamic player he is. So then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, for the Denver Broncos, I'm going to give it to PS2, aka Patrick Surtain. And he had a great season this year. He had 4 interceptions, 34 tackles. And in my personal opinion, he is arguably one of the best cornerbacks in the league. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate you guys watching the video all the way through. Who is the best player on your favorite team? Did I miss anyone? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm out.